Alayne Kay Christian here. My second Sienna the Cowgirl Fairy book, Cowboy Trouble, is finally here. And I thought I would read the first 3 chapters just to give you a little teaser and a little taste of what this one's like. Just like Sienna the Cowgirl Fairy trying to make it rain, there's a glossary in the back of the book that explains all of the cowgirl terms. If you get tired of listening to my voice, you can always just turn my little crackly voice down and read the book yourself, because the video will take you through it. I thought I'd go through who's who. We got Sienna, and we've got Cassie, and we've got Allie, and we got that nasty Billy Bob and his nasty friends Smiley and Pearly. On the next slide, you will see Aunt Rose and Ma. Ma is the one with the fairy wings. I was happier than a snake sunning on a woodpile when Aunt Rose asked me to be in her elegant wedding. I was sadder than a rodeo clown on a rainy day when I learned flower girls wear dresses and fancy shoes. It all started with Ma. She come a-flitting into the barn with them wings of hers quivering from excitement. "Sienna, I have some marvelous news. I just got off the phone with your pa's sister Rose, and she stopped talking and gave Pa that look that says, 'You tell her.' Well, it's like this, Sunshine," Pa said. "Your Aunt Rose wants you to be a flower girl in her wedding." "What are you looking so down in the mouth for?" I asked. "I'll pick her the biggest and best bluebonnet bouquet she's ever laid eyes on." "It's not how it works," Ma said. "You will carry a basket of flower petals. You will scatter the petals in front of Rose as she walks down the aisle." "Oh, easy peasy if you'll let me pick some of your roses. They make the best petals. I'll put them in my old Easter basket." Figuring we was done talking, I snatched my fishing pole and headed for my bettermost fishing hole. When I got back home, Aunt Rose was there grinning like a donkey gnawing on a cactus. "I'm so glad you'll be my flower girl, Sienna. Here's your shoes, your pretty flower headband, and best of all—" She opened that big white box, and what I saw left me as scared as a lizard with a roadrunner on its tail. "Dress!" my brain screamed. "Pink dress!" it screamed even louder. "Fancy shoes? Flower headband?" my brain cried. "I'm sorry, Aunt Rose, I can't be your flower girl." "Sienna!" Ma scolded. "What? I was polite. I told her I was sorry." Aunt Rose's smile slid right off her face. "Why not?" I couldn't stand to look at her sad face, so I dropped my eyes to the floor. "I just can't, that's all." I didn't want to disappoint her, but I didn't have a choice. I used some more good manners and said, "Excuse me," and then I ran out the door. Ma hollered, "Do not slam that!" Bang! It was too late. That screen door clapped behind me. Out in the barn, I took a long sniff. The earthy smell of damp hay and cow pies took my pink dress jitters away. "What are you all worked up about?" Pa asked. Without a word, I looked at him crossways. "Oh, Aunt Rose," he said. I got myself busy saddling up Duke. "A pink dress, fancy shoes, a flower headband?" Pa handed me Duke's bridle. That wedding will be one of the most important days of Rose's life," he said, "and she wants you to be a part of it. Do you reckon it'll hurt you to wear that dress for one day?" I hopped up on Duke. "Yep, it'll hurt. It'll hurt real bad." I told Pa where I was heading and hightailed it to Allie's house. Since I met Allie at fairy camp, we got to be real good friends, best friends. I taught her all about cowgirling. She turned out to be a fine cowgirl fairy. Her ma ain't none too happy about it, though. She thinks Allie needs to be more ladylike. I reckon my ma and Allie's ma put their heads together on that topic a whole lot. When I got to Allie's house, we saddled up her horse and went for a nice long ride to calm my jitters. Being a flower girl doesn't sound so bad, Allie said. Then she was quiet for a long while. Well, okay, if I were to put myself in your boots for a minute, I would say it is kind of bad. I can't do it. I just can't do it, I bellyached. I'd look mighty silly in a dress, a trip over my own feet in them fancy shoes, and I ain't much good at manners, neither. I couldn't erase that picture in my brain of Aunt Rose's smile sliding off her face. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I just couldn't do it. I had me one huge puzzle to solve. I twisted and turned and flipped and flopped my brain every which way. Not one bee buzzed in my bonnet. When I got back home, Ma was waiting for me. She was all excited about something. I wasn't sure that I wanted to know what that something was. She waved a colorful flyer in the air. Look, I figured out how to prepare you to be a flower girl. What in the big wide world is wrong with that woman? I have no intention of being a flower girl. Do I have to tell her again? I ain't. Ma interrupted me. I signed you up for Cowgirl Charm School. Allie's mom signed her up, too. Cowgirl school? Ever since Ma made me go to fairy camp instead of cowgirl camp, I've been wanting to make me some cowgirl friends. I was as excited as a mockingbird in the springtime when I learned I could finally meet some other cowgirls. I didn't know what charm meant, but cowgirl school? I was all for it. On the first day of cowgirl school, Allie and me was almost out the door when Ma stopped us. She hung my fairy dust pouch around my neck. A proper fairy never leaves home without her dust. Your wand is in your backpack. I snatched my lasso and jammed it into my backpack. A proper cowgirl never leaves home without her lasso. When we got to that school, I figured we must have been at the wrong place. I eyeballed a bunch of fancy schmancy girls wearing Sunday go-to-meeting dresses. There was no way it could be cowgirl school. I ain't never seen so much lace and ruffles in all my born days. And them flower-covered bonnets they had on their heads looked downright silly. Where were their cowgirl hats and boots? No shirts? No pants? Or vests? What kind of cowgirls were these people? Welcome to Poise Charm Girl School, the teacher said. I am, she said her name real slow as she wrote it on the whiteboard, Ms. Gladstone. Then she drew a heart at the end. What in the blazes is Cowgirl Charm School? I said. I thought I knew what I was getting into. Now I wasn't so sure. First of all, young lady, we do not interrupt without using proper manners, Miss Gladstone said. Second, you are cowgirls, not cowboys. You are here to learn how to be ladies. I'd rather be a cowboy, I bellyached. I reckon I should have went to cowboy school. I wasn't none too happy when that teacher made me put on a long fancy dress and girly shoes. Shoes that were a lot like Aunt Rose's flower girl shoes. I don't know which was worse, the shoes pinching my toes or the dress pinching my wings. Ma makes sure my shirts have extra room for my wings. That fancy dress was as tight as one of Pa's bear hugs. I figured I knew what it felt like to be a butterfly itching to break loose from its cocoon. Allie seemed happier than a pig in mud with all that charm school craziness. Her wings must have fit just right under her dress. She pranced around in them fancy shoes, shaking hands with them fancy schmancy girls. Hello, I'm Alejandra. It's nice to meet you. I didn't care one bit about meeting them girls or learning their fancy ways. I plopped down in a chair, crossed my arms, and stared at the wall until... Girls, it's time to go to the tea room, Miss Gladstone announced. Follow me. Tea room? What in the blazes is a tea room? All them girls gabbed and giggled and shuffled away. Sienna, you too, Miss Gladstone shouted. I dragged myself out of that chair and forced my toe-pinching, wing-crushed self into the other room. We practiced we didn't practice nary a one cowgirling way. Instead, we practiced lady ways, walking in a straight line with a book on our head, sitting up straight while sipping tea and balancing that darn book on our head, eating tiny sandwiches and using napkins, and saying please, thank you, and pardon me. Getting myself to say please wasn't too bad, but Miss Gladstone didn't care much for my burps and panty stinkers. You'd think she was happy with me. You think she'd be happy with me because I used my manners. I said pardon me and excuse me every time. When we sat down at the table, I was hungrier than a hog without slop. I grabbed one of them tiny sandwiches and gobbled it down whole. Miss Gladstone's eyes and nostrils opened up like an angry bull. Sienna! Tiny bites, tiny bites. She was on me like a buzzard on roadkill. Sienna! Do not lick your fingers. I wiped my hands on my dress. Sienna! Use your napkin, please. I wiped my nose. Miss Gladstone gave me a new napkin. We never wipe our nose on our napkin. Put that filthy thing in the hamper, please. When it was time to sip tea, I forgot the sipping part. I took a gulp instead and choked. Tea spewed from my mouth all over that fine tablecloth and them fancy girls. Tea shot from my nose, too. I couldn't help but use my napkin to wipe it. Miss Gladstone huffed and puffed and rolled her eyes, but she didn't say one word. During posture lessons, I couldn't balance a book on my head to save my life. Those things flew every which way, breaking teacups and smashing tiny sandwiches. When one crashed down on Miss Gladstone's foot, she forgot her manners for a minute. Gosh darn it, Sienna, she shouted. And she forgot to be ladylike, too. She hopped up and hopped around on one leg like she was a human pogo stick. But then she put both feet solid on the floor, cleared her throat, and stood very straight. We'll work on your posture later. Forget later. I'm out of here. I turned to find an escape route. That's when I went flying right into that line of girls with the books on their heads. Before I knew it, I was in a pile of whining girls and books. I ain't sure if I tripped over my own fancy shoe-wearing feet or that long girly dress. Maybe it was one of them there books. All I knew for sure was there I was, rolling around and trying to climb out of that pile of girls and books. Allie reached out her hand. Another girl reached out hers. I grabbed them both and they pulled me out of the pile. I told you I told you I'd trip over my own feet in them fancy shoes, I bellyached to Allie. I just ain't flower girl material. Give it time, Allie said. It takes practice. Some girls ain't made for this stuff, the other girl said. She reached out her hand again. I'm Cassie. Nice to meet you. I had no plans to hobnob with any of them fancy pant girls, but I wasn't sure how to take this Cassie. Part of me agreed with her. Some girls just ain't made for that stuff. I reckon I'm one of them. But then Allie was right too. Pa always says practice and patience is what it takes to reach a goal. In time, even a hard-working, impatient turtle reaches a finish line. There was something about Cassie that made me reach out my hand and shake hers. It's fine to meet you, Cassie. Miss Gladstone helped the other girls to their feet. She gave me a wicked stare. Maybe you'll be better outside with the horses. Allie hooked her arm through mine and led me to the door. You've got this, she said. You are the best with horses. Yep, horses and me get along real fine. Finally, some real cowgirling. But Miss Gladstone's idea of horse riding wasn't one bit like what I pictured in my brain. Before we went outside, Miss Gladstone made me put on one of them silly flower-covered bonnets. Aunt Rose better thank her lucky stars that I love her so much, I thought, as I shoved that thing on my head. If it wasn't for wanting to please Aunt Rose, I would have hopped on Duke and burned a breeze out of there. I couldn't help but wonder and worry. How in the big wide world am I ever going to ride Duke with that dress all over my legs? First we had to practice tiptoeing around horse apples while holding up our girly dresses. I stumbled and one of my fancy shoes got stuck right in a pile of horse poop. Them other girls stared and snickered, all except Cassie. I knew I took to her for some reason. My face grew hotter than Pa's salsa. It was probably as red, too. Snickering girls, pinching toes, tortured crumpled wings. I was crankier than a rodeo bull being teased by a clown. That's it, I hollered. I'll be doggone if I'll go another minute without my boots. Remember your Aunt Rose, Ellie said. She pulled my shoes out of the poop and swished it in a horse trough. There, as good as new. I thought of Aunt Rose's smileless face and put that dang shoe on. It's squishy wet, I bellyached. Go inside and get yourself a dry pair of shoes, Miss Gladstone said. This was my chance to get into my cowgirl duds and make a run for it. But in my brain, all I could see was that smile sliding off of Aunt Rose's face. I flipped and tossed shoes until I found me a pair that almost didn't pinch. Finally, it was time to ride. I was madder than an old wet hen when I saw Duke. What kind of saddle is that? Where's Duke's regular old saddle? I was madder than a flock of old wet hens when I learned I had to ride side saddle. First, that silly bonnet got in my way. Wearing that bonnet was a lot like balancing a book on my head. I put the bonnet on, it slid off. I put it on, it slid off. Just when I was about to fling that thing into the middle of nowhere, it stayed on. As much as I didn't want to, I tied the fancy ribbon tight under my chin. That dang bonnet wouldn't be sliding off no more. The dress was a thorn in my behind, too. I climbed up on Duke, I slid back off. I climbed up again, slid back off. And again, and again, and again. I wasn't about to let no dress or weird saddle keep me from riding my horse. Finally, I was able to sit up on that saddle sideways. That was the first thing I got right all day. The truth was, I didn't belong at charm school. I'd never be a good flower girl. Aunt Rose would have to find someone else to do it. I was pondering plans to get myself into some proper cowgirl duds and skedaddle when Billy Bob and his band of bullies came along. Them boys are the biggest troublemakers in these here parts. They're so mean they'd eat from the same dish with a rattlesnake. I can usually hold my own around them, but I knew once they saw me wearing them girly clothes and riding side saddle, it wasn't going to be pretty. I was hopping mad when Billy Bob shouted, "Hey, Sienna, what's with that garden on your head? You look mighty silly up there on that horse a-wearing a dress." I was double hopping mad when Curly traipsed through a cow pie hollering, "I bet you can't do this wearing them shoes." I was triple hopping mad when Smiley built a loop and roped me around my waist. I guess I wasn't quite settled side saddle because I tumbled off that horse. I flew one way, my shoes flew another, and that bonnet popped off my head and settled on Duke's head. All three of them rascals hee-hawed like a bunch of happy donkeys. "I thought you was a cowgirl," Billy Bob said. "You look like a fancy-schmancy girl to me." "We're all cowgirls," Cassie said. I picked myself up, got myself out of that loop, and headed straight for them boys. "Anything y'all can do, we can do better." "You can't even stay on your horse," Billy Bob said, "and y'all can't hold a candle to us cowboys." "I reckon me and these here cowgirls can keep up with y'all any day of the week," I said. "Bet you can't," Billy Bob said. I lassoed a fence post and I said, "I challenge you to a cowpoke skills contest." Billy Bob lassoed the same fence post. Okay, but us cowboys will beat you girly girls. Cowgirls, Allie said. I looked Billy Bob dead in the eyes. If we prove we're a match for all, you have to spend a day with us learning some manners and be our dance partners during dance lessons. Billy Bob hopped off his horse. He put his nose inches from mine. Ain't if y'all are the girly girls I know y'are? I wanted to step back and away from his nasty sardine breath, but I stood my ground. There ain't no way you boys will win. If by some miracle you did win, us girls would do your chores for a week. That suits me just fine, Billy Bob said. I couldn't take his stink a second more. I stepped back and said, meet us at my pa's ranch on Saturday. Yee-haw, Billy hollered. See y'all on Saturday. Them boys left us in a big gust of dust. That's when I came to my senses. Pa always says, tossin' your rope before building a loop doesn't catch the calf. I ain't real sure what that means, but I was sure that I tossed my rope before building a loop. I got so fired up with them boys that I didn't ask one girl if she was up for that bet. By the time they all hung their heads and snuck off, my guess was they wasn't up for it at all. That's the end of the third chapter. I'd like to invite you also to check out book one of the Sienna the Cowgirl Fairy series, Trying to Make It Rain. Lots of fun. You can find both books, and all of my books actually, wherever books are sold. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my reading or read the first three chapters yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do purchase the book, I sure would appreciate some reviews. Thank you.